Hey, Bob, there's a really telling part about you talking to Jared Kushner and Jared trying to explain the Trump administration, and said if you want to understand it, you can understand it through these four articles or books. And it's just bizarre and really speaks to the malignancy of this administration and also just how vapid they all are. Jared pointed out Peggy Noonan. And Peggy's column that crazy doesn't last. It all feels so dangerous. That's how Peggy finished that column. And then he said, you look at the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. And is you right? Of course, how bizarre that he would point to a manipulative, directionless, again, vapid character in this bizarre book. And then Chris Whipple's book on chief of staffs and presidents, where Whipple concluded that Trump, quote, clearly had no idea how to govern. And then I thought the most damning, Dilbert's creator wrote a book called Win Bigly. And in it, he explains how Trump lies intentionally and can, quote, invent any reality. And then Kushner said to you that when he lies, he creates a controversy and he creates a media reaction where they're trying to fact check. Like, for instance, when he lied in the State of the Union address and lied about having the best economy ever. Jared Kushner said that lying was a winning strategy because lying creates controversy. And when Donald Trump lies and when he lies and when the administration lies, the press reacts to all of their lies, and that only amplifies the story, which I've got to say is extraordinarily damning on all fronts.
Well, I mean, the phrase that Kushner uses is controversy elevates message. And one example is Trump goes out and says, as he repeatedly says before the virus, we had the best economy in the history of the world, in the history of the country. And Kushner says, now, literally, that's not true. And the fact checkers go and say, oh, wait a minute, in the 1950s it was better and so forth. And Kushner does the analysis. And Joe, you're exactly right. It's stunning. The controversy over it elevates the Trump message about, oh, the economy is good. And the average person out there hears Trump say it's the best economy in the entire world ever. And they say, well, gee, the economy's pretty good. And then they see the fact checkers come along, the nitpickers, and say, oh, yeah, well, Eisenhower's period was better. And, you know, they even go back way hundreds of years in history. And the average person says, now, wait a minute. Why are they going after the president on this? And so this is a calculation. This is not just accident. This is intentional. And so Kushner's analysis, oh, so we've controversy? Fine. It elevates the message, a basic one, that the economy is good. And average person isn't going to go through the economic history of the world and say, is that in fact true? It's in fact not true. But it's true enough. See, that's the whole strategy here. True enough.
Well, and they keep repeating it, Mika. So members of the media, and it's one of the things that we've said repeatedly on the show. If you just look at GDP growth, Jimmy Carter had faster GDP growth than did Donald Trump through the first 3 years of his presidency. You look, even before the coronavirus, out of the last 11, 12 presidents, Donald Trump was 6th or 7th. Not even in the last 11 or 12 presidents on GDP growth. So again, it's one lie after another. But as Jared Kushner says, the lying is good. As the Dilbert creator said, the lying is good because he can create his own reality. Yeah. And that elevates the message. That is a really disturbed, really malignant growth on the presidency and on this country. But again, they're admitting it all to Bob. We always knew it was true. They're just admitting it to Bob.
Bob, you draw a conclusion about this president that he's not the guy for the job, to say the least. Can you describe
at the end?
Yes. Can you describe then what a second term would look like under this same president? Not just his tendencies and policy decisions and executive orders, but his news conferences and even the team that he has in place across all departments.
Well, yeah, who knows what a second Trump term would be like. But I think one of the things we really need to address, and I've thought about this, is the Trump supporter. I know lots of Trump supporters, financial advisors, business people, workers, military people, law enforcement people, just the average person out there. And I think we need to understand the appeal, the emotional appeal Trump has to them. And I recently read a column where one analyst was saying, Trump lacks decorum. And lots of people will say, oh, he's breaking all the norms. And lots of people like that. They want a president. And the president was out either yesterday or the other day, and he said in this kind of very ringing self-confidence way to his supporters at this rally, I'm with you, I'm with you. And as far as they're concerned, that is the case, and we need to understand, and I think not get into the trap of, saying, oh, well, there's only one way to think about Trump. There are other ways to think about Trump, and people do, and we should not kind of say, in doing this book, I thought, well, the conclusions are obvious. They are to me as a reporter. They are not to lots of people, and I have to understand that there are decent people who look at this in a very, very different way. That's fine. We're going to have an election, and people can sort this out as they want. And as I keep saying about Ben Bradley, he said, soldier on. He used to always say, nose down, ass up, moving slowly forward. And that's what we have to do. I think in the, 50 days before the election, some of the most important reporting, factual reporting about what's going on and what the attitudes are and what the policies are and who's doing what, because we are in, as I say, and I'm sorry to repeat, but that we are in the midst of a hailstorm. We are in a kind of public health crisis that we all know somebody who has died, or somebody, because it's really, we are in a pinch, to say the least.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.